Awesome. Well, glad to have you back here, and I guess you have me back here, but glad to be back with you, I guess more aptly said. Well, I guess getting right into it, we were talking a little bit before, we got rolling here, and maybe we can pick up where we left off. And one thing that we touched on a little bit last time that I don't really feel like I covered everything I want to, and we still may not touch on it all today, but our conversation around Henry Ford and the early days of the automotive industry. I know we were talking about some of his involvement getting into World War II, and if you don't mind maybe restating what you were telling me about what you understood from his hearings and him not necessarily recalling, maybe some malpractices.
I do remember, I'm no expert on Henry Ford, but I did have some discussions with my dad. My dad was really into him and read up a lot on him. I do know from a documentary I saw that he was denied. Ford believed that the automobile, and he felt like he could build an automobile that the common man could drive.
Right.
And back in that time frame, I don't know what year this would have been.
Pre-1906, really.
Yeah, Model T, before Model T, of course.
Which one?
Yeah, or Model A, I guess, would have been the first one,
well,
right?
But then a lot of people don't realize that before Ford Motor Company, as we know it, that he started when he was 40, he had already been working in the automotive industry for over a decade. And Ford Motor Company, I think, was his fourth company before he actually was able to figure out the business aspects of, mass producing automobiles. Yeah. And I think he had maybe sold a few hundred, over like that 12-year time frame leading up to where then he basically started over in previous companies. He already had a Model A, he already had a Model T. And so there's multiple Model A and Model Ts, that a lot of people don't think about.
I just remember that there he had to go before and submit to get a business license. And he had to go before a committee of a bureaucracy group to get a license. And he was denied because they didn't believe that the automobile, it was practical for the common man to have the automobile. It was only something that the elite and the wealthy in society could afford back then. And they didn't see his vision. And so that's when I think from that point, he separated from, I guess, a lot of the common thought at the time, and he went his way. And, he's the one who invented the assembly line.
Production line, yeah.
Production line. He invented
specifically for the automobile. Because I know that's something like, there's been a lot of people attributed to creating production parts or reusable or replaceable parts. And I know like Elijah Whitney, was credited that with the cotton gin, I think. And then George Washington Carver, I think, had similar patents. And there was actually some discussions when Samuel Colt, the Colt revolver, he, I think, is really should be credited with just, no matter for guns, what the product is, truly replaceable parts that you're making this one, component 100 times over. It's going to work in any one of those 100, guns in his case, where apparently in, I think it was George Washington Carver's case where he was accredited or attributed coming up with replaceable parts, and I could be mixing him up with Elijah Whitney. But in any case, they went to the patent office and tricked the patent officer into thinking they had replaceable parts, but they supposedly had marked the differences very subtly. Like, this part will only work in this full assembly, even though they're the same part, right? There's some of those minute differences between them. And
so what did they do? They did a demonstration?
Yeah, they did a demonstration to show that they had replaceable parts, but they were marked and not really replaceable, able to go from one unit to the other.
Yeah. Really strange. And, we think, that's just so common sense that, but think about it. Back in those times, everything was customized, right? You'd buy a weapon, a musket or something, and it was built by an artisan or a craftsman. A
cast iron pan for cooking,
everything was so individualized and unique. And this concept of making something, through mass production of, with an assembly line or whatever, I'm sure that was a radical way of be kind of like an internet idea now, before the internet happened here. I can remember when I heard people talk about ordering groceries through the computer and having them delivered. I remember when people first started talking about that, and we all rolled our eyes, like, man, that's never going to happen. And that is exactly what's going on now, right?
Yeah, no, that's I actually was hearing some of that, with the work I do in the drone space yesterday. I was at a local high school doing mock interviews for students in like their mechatronics pathway, flight operations pathway, and that's just some of the outreach I do. Kind of help students along beyond like doing internships with us and. Talking with the head of like their media center, the library, talking about that same concept for like, hey, what do you see, drones looking like in 5, 10, 15 years, and kind of giving the same spiel I told you during our last episode that, much like the early days of the automotive industry where people thought about them as toys for rich people, that's kind of where we're at right now, pre-Model T, moment, so to speak. And then you fast forward, 5, 10 years, you still have your early adopters, predominantly businesses, right? Getting automobiles so they can provide deliveries to their customers, right? Instead of having one delivery business providing all the deliveries for businesses in that nearby area. And then you work down your way to why doesn't just every person have one of these automobiles? And whenever they want something, they can just go pick it up themselves, right? And I think, that just, it's obvious to me that's going to happen in the drone industry, but much like in the same way, no one thought there would be a business, reason to have, cars for the everyday person or computers for the everyday person.
I like something you said from the last podcast. You said if you're operating a drone today, you're either with the military, you're doing something illegal, or it's a toy.
Yeah.
You're a kid having fun with a toy.
I said like photographer, videographer, but yeah, you could do something like more specialized. Like we were working with the Fulton County Sheriff's Office or jail, went and talked with them, and they were having problems with people using larger drones to deliver contraband into prisons. And I was part of a panel discussion for the Technology Association of Georgia back in 2023, part of like a smart home, smart city sort of panel discussion. And people, in the audience were asking me, so like, aren't you worried about privacy, with these drones? And like, that's a big kind of buzz around drones. Like, well, what if someone's going to be looking at, me or my daughter in my backyard or whatever? And, not to say that can't happen. I think that is a very much so an overblown problem, that people have with drones. But what's really not overblown, what you don't hear a lot of people talking about, are these drones that have a very real capability of being able to drop a payload. And it's not just, drugs or, weapons or, cell phones into prisons. It could be, a public event, that someone wants to drop something over, a crowd of people. Yeah. And like, that's the real danger with these drones that people don't talk about.
Yeah. And with technology, and, I've always said it, if you have a biological or a radiological, a biological or a chemical weapon, right?
Yep.
And they can come in small packages, some very deadly stuff. And, you fly a drone over the Super Bowl or over a crowded football stadium and spray some of this stuff, let's say, and it's very contagious, let's say, you could really find yourself in a bad situation. So the technology is going to make life, and has made life, and will only, I think, continue to make life a lot more complex, every aspect.
Complex and or convenient, right? Convenient to do something that, could just be getting eggs from the grocery store, or more convenient to carry out a heinous act, you know?
Yeah.
So with the good comes the bad, but I like to look at it, much like computers. If you go buy a computer from Best Buy, let's say a Dell computer from Best Buy, and you hack an energy grid with that computer, is Best Buy or Dell held liable? No, right? Like it's how you use the product as a consumer, right?
So you're saying it comes down to good versus evil.
I mean,
when we deal with human beings,
deal with intent.
It comes down to, and you're either going to be, I love the saying, it's a mighty thin slice of ham that has only one side. There's two sides to everything. And so every situation, everything, there's always going to be, there's two angles on it. And if we use this technology for good, I agree with you. It can really make life better. Somebody's going to use it for evil.
I mean, again, with the contraband deliveries into prisons, that's already happening. And it's just like, how can we give, more people the tool to equalize the playing field? And this is where I really like Samuel Colt's, story as an entrepreneur, someone that, as the saying goes, God didn't make people equal. The Colt revolver did,
That's his saying?
I think it was a saying like attributed to his invention.
That's
like of the Wild
funny.
West. Yeah.
So that sounds like a quote that came from the West, from the Wild West.
Yeah.
Well, say it again.
And I'm butchering it, but it's like God didn't make people equal. The Colt revolver did.
That's funny.
But it was really an equalizing ground, especially when you had the repeater rifles, even against Indians that didn't have rifles, one shot and then, oh my God, reload and you're dead. You got a bow and arrow coming at you, however fast, and, before you can reload, that was a huge game changer. And I think that's just like, because we don't have a society built around, guns, for better and for worse, and that's arguable, right? Because there are more guns in the United States than there are people. But it's not like the same way. Like I'd like to think about, again, Theodore Roosevelt, who we brought up last episode, and people think about him a lot as like this great, heroic, larger than life sort of figure, but he had some very deep troubles, especially growing up in his childhood. And it was just common at that time to carry around a revolver. And he just was in a tizzy, one night when he was, I think, like 12, 13 years old, and ended up just shooting his neighbor's dog, And it is like, that just happened a lot more because, like if you carry a gun, you are more likely to use it versus not having a gun that you can use to begin with, right? And
I've heard numerous law enforcement say if they had their choice, they would rather people not carry.
Yep.
One specifically said, a police officer, he said, when you're armed, you walk different, you talk different, you act different. And then if you have somebody who's drinking alcohol or, is pissed off about something or whatever, and they're armed, man, I have a good friend of mine who recently bought a sidearm, right? And I support it, but he was talking also about carrying it, and I'm glad I said what I said to him, because it was just a nice equalizing statement.
Right.
You really need to be careful if you carry, because if you pull that thing out, man, you're a split second away from a decision that could affect your life for the rest. It could be a negative aspect on your life for the rest of your life. So I think people that have that kind of mentality, they are the type of people who they're responsible and mature and should be, should carry or should have access to firearms. It's the kid or the person that doesn't have that mentality who is so dangerous, because they do make those mistakes. Think about the urban gangs and people like that who don't have training and who are just brought up in different ways. And that's kind of where I guess that's going.
Yeah, but I mean, even think about it from like a school shooting perspective, right? The uptick that we've had there, and they're just not part of our society anymore in the way that, I don't know if you ever experienced this growing up, or having like a rifle club at your school or a gun club at your school. I know that's maybe even a little bit before your time, and depending, on the region, the area that you grew up in, it still may be, happening somewhere around some places around the country. I know even just we were up at a high school, middle school, like drone and robotics championship event at East Tennessee State University last week, or 2 weeks ago now, maybe even a little bit more than that. But they had a rifle range, there on campus. And it was like enclosed within like their indoor stadium. And so I think there are some benefits, to, getting more people familiar, with, guns.
Gun safety.
Yeah, gun safety, operating them. And, that just from a school shooting perspective, I've heard a lot of teachers, also make the claim that they should be able to carry, have to go through some sort of like specialized training. Maybe if they were prior law enforcement or military, maybe they should have the approval. Have you heard anything along those lines? And what, like, I don't know if you have any thoughts around that either, but
I've heard both sides of that. Yeah. And one of the sides that I hear, which I see their viewpoint, and to me it makes total sense. And the argument is you don't solve the problem of too many guns in society by getting more guns to, and that argument makes sense to me. And I don't know. At least
at a surface level. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know what the true answer is, man. It's just, it goes back to that. It's a human situation.
Right.
The thing I struggle with most is that we hear people talk about after a shooting, let's say at a school happens, you hear people talk about the weapons that are being used, and what I don't hear people discussing deeply enough is why.
Right.
Why are these kids? Why are people doing what they're doing? Something is wrong here.
I think RFK Jr. is doing a good job of asking those sort of questions, getting a lot of
elaborate.
Well, and not even just from like a school shooting perspective, although he has asked about this, but also
some
about like
the
sickness of Americans, right? Just like, why are we one of the unhealthiest nations of developed nations around the world,
wealthiest
right?
nation in the world,
right? And now we live in a time where you're more likely to be overweight, obese if you're poor, in a way that's never really been possible, at least at the scale that it's, possible in the norm today. Although I have heard that, especially with the younger generations, they're starting to course correct a bit more, having more of a focus on a healthy lifestyle and not wanting to eat a lot of the more processed foods that really like, my generation, and I would say, our producer Brian's generation that we really grew up with, kind of at the height of, let's scale all the fast food. Let's, fill up all the shelves with, a billion different types of cereals and, all the boxes. And that's, to me, I've really tried to take, I might have heard it from like Robert Kennedy Jr. on his first podcast appearance that he did with a comedian, Theo Vaughn, like 5-6 years ago now. But I forgot exactly where I heard it, but it's like at the grocery store, you should really just be sticking to like the edges, like the bakery, like the produce, the dairy meats, like everything else in the middle is junk.
I've heard that too. Yeah, you should steer away from the further in boxes, the center. Yeah, the boxed food and heavily processed stuff.
Yeah,
that's a good point. In the 70s, I remember, people weren't as fat as they are now, it seems. And the workout craze hadn't even taken hold, not like it is today.
Right.
Jogging came in the late 70s, right? People began to run, and in the 80s. But I think there's a direct correlation with the food, the stuff we're putting in our bodies. And I hope that RFK, if he gets approved and comes in, because we're still waiting on
his confirmation.
Yeah. Right. He's gotten part of the process done, but he's not all the way there.
Yeah, he's been through both, I think, the Congressional and Senate hearing, and now they're just waiting on the vote. He might have another hearing that I'm not aware of, but I think, just waiting on the vote now.
And I don't have a problem with, and if we can slide into politics just here for a minute, because there's a lot going on today. Is the what's today, the 5th, 6th, 7th of February 2025, and we have this Elon Musk situation in Washington, D.C., and he's going in all these departments, and there's a big focus to go into the federal government and take out the excesses and the waste and the fraud and things like that. And I just will go on the record right now and say I don't have a problem with someone looking and us looking at our
waste,
our government situation, this federal situation. And I think it's a smart. Companies have to do it all the time. They have to audit, and they have to cut the fat out and keep it lean in order to stay profitable. And the government, I feel, is in the same situation, same boat.
Yeah, from that perspective, there's the famous, talking point over the last few years that the Pentagon has not passed an audit, for, any time that they've been audited. And I think most recently they could not account for $1.9 trillion worth of assets, right? And yet every other company that deals with the government has to go through an audit and pass, right?
Yeah.
And it's again very much the rules for thee, not for me. That I think you are starting to see a lot of like the Washington D.C. politicians, really start to push against the people trying to right some of those wrongs. Try to kind of trim the fat, so to speak.
And transparency, I think, is a word that we're going to hear a lot over the next 4 years, and as long as things are transparent, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. And we may not want to go heavy into politics at this point of the podcast. You might want to do a little bit later, but I just wanted to interject that because there's a lot going on in our society right now.
I think from a transparency perspective, what's been very apparent for me, again, this is someone like that probably shows more over the last few minutes than it did last episode, but I was very adamantly like against Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris in this last election cycle. I was never really against Donald Trump in a way a lot of people were. I just thought he was too divisive. And that was by and large because I feel like I fell for a lot of the media propaganda that was telling me he was divisive, for different reasons, as opposed to him actually saying or doing anything divisive, right? But I was all for Robert Kennedy Jr., basically the whole election cycle up until like the last couple of months. And what's been a breath of fresh air to me is seeing all of the live press conferences that Donald Trump has already done, all of the live recording sessions that he's done, signing executive orders, fielding questions from reporters, and really just welcoming the public into the White House in a way that we haven't seen for really like 5 years since he was last in office. And I don't think enough people appreciated that because it was almost kind of expected that, as the president, as the highest level of public office, you have to be a public figure. And then all of a sudden over the last, 4 years, we basically wanted to pretend like that's not a crucial part of the role.
Yeah, I agree. Served in the Navy for 5 years, and I got to closely observe and witness commanding officers, not only U.S. commanding officers, but also foreign officers and COs, so to speak. And every single one that I have witnessed every day has to stand before the troops, and if we say as a CEO, it's shareholders, okay, or board of directors, and think on their feet and communicate honestly, openly, and be able to do that. And I would agree. The last 4 years, we hadn't seen that, and the American people saw it too.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why I feel Trump won the election that he did. And he'll. There's a lot to discuss here about with this, and I think the history books will say he will go down in American history as one of the most populist presidents this nation's ever had.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that. I think one of the just comments around USAID and that you might be able to kind of shine some light on for me. I had never heard about it until, the last few days, last week, whatever it's been, that USAID stands for basically international development funding. And it's like one of those, like the Patriot Act, we give it a name that implies we're doing good for the American people when in reality we're robbing them. In the case of the Patriot Act, their right to privacy or our right to privacy. And in the case of USAID, it's like, hey, we're going to make this program that, almost implies that we're going to be giving funding, collecting funding, and using that for areas in need within the United States. And
people that are hungry and who've had hurricane and tornado and earthquake damage, whatever. And
FEMA-esque. Yeah.
And when you find out that it's a lot, it's that, but it's a lot more than that.
Right.
And it was founded in, I think, 1961 under Kennedy. And it was a presidential order that he wrote that in. It wasn't law that he passed. It's my understanding. He created that office. And now they have, 10,000 employees?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
10,000 people working in that office. And I don't know if what I'm saying is accurate, but I'm pretty sure I saw this morning that estimates have Trump cutting that down to around 300 to 500 employees. There's a lot of people that are working there that DOGE does not feel is legitimate for them to.
Well, you heard about the email that was sent out to all federal employees, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we work with a colleague of ours, a fellow media producer that works with us. Also works at a federal organization very prevalent here in Atlanta that deals with, viruses, and he, like every other, federal employee, got that email subject fork in the road.
Right. Yeah. Right. Which way you want to go? You make your choice.
Right. And it's, hey, this is a job we're looking for the best and brightest America has to offer. And that's going to, require showing up in the office 5 days a week, like a job entails by and large. And if you want to be a part of, this better, brighter tomorrow, come on. If not, accept this offer and you can continue working home from September. And,
I think,
good luck.
What is it as of today? It's, I think, 10,000 federal employees have opted to retire.
Okay.
Or to take the package. That's what I heard just recently.
I have not even looked into any of the numbers. I just, looked a little bit into the email being sent out after I heard from our colleague, receiving it and, just talking to him about it. And again, I get it puts some people in some tough situations, like thinking about like, hey, is this really what I want to do for, the rest of my career or, the next part of my career? But I think that is, probably for the better, not only for us as a country, but for those people as individuals that have been using it as a way like, hey, make ends meet, provide income, but maybe it's not what they really want to be doing in life, but it's been so comfortable. Why go do anything else? Right. Yeah. Well, I guess beyond that, anything stand out to you from the congressional hearings, confirmation hearings that you saw? I know we briefly touched on like Kash Patel. You watched that. Anything stick out to you there?
I'm very impressed with Kash Patel, and I don't really have a lot to say against him and what I would say the left feels. The biggest argument that I've heard that they have is that they feel he is, I don't know if this is a good word, but sycophantic. He's going to do Trump's bid. Whatever Trump wants him to do, he's going to, yes, sir, right away, sir. He's going to snap to attention and do it. And that's a legitimate concern to have. But when you listen to Kash Patel and listen to him speak, I think this second go-round with Trump is going to be different from the first because I think we have people in now that are in alignment with his and have bought, and I'm not saying they're sycophantic, but they agree with him and they are here to support him.
Right.
And they're going to carry forth the vision I think that he has. And
I think
I'm impressed with Kash Patel.
Yeah. To that end, I think there have been some minor communication problems with some people that I've seen in these congressional hearings where they're using language like, this is what Trump wants. And it's like, I get like what you're trying to get across in saying that, but maybe it's like, hey, this is what Trump thinks is best for the American people. That way it's just not misconstrued in like a
dictator.
An unauthentic sort of way, because I've been, watching, I always like to think it's MSNBC, but NBC Meet the Press, leading up to the election, I was watching every episode, post-election watching every episode until really this last Sunday. I just couldn't take it anymore. I mean, just the total like blatant misportrayal, of these congressional hearings, like clipping 1 minute little segments, 30-second little segments, or breaking apart answers, so just we're going to take this part, cut to this person grilling them, and then cut to this other kind of unrelated part of the answer. And
on that line, you have heard of the recent 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris that was put forth to the American people before the election. And now it's my understanding
the unedited version.
We have the unedited version.
I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, you haven't? I haven't seen the whole thing. But what they did is they asked her a question. I don't know. Again, I need to watch it myself. But
I watched the original one in the entirety.
The essence of it is that she was asked a question and she answered the question. And it was so convoluted and long-winded, they had to edit it down to make her articulate.
Yep.
That's the bottom line, to make her articulate and concise. And that's misrepresentation. Some people are like, well, that's just editing. That's what we do in journalism. But this is different, man. This is for the presidency of the United States.
Right.
And in order to be effective in that role, you have to be an articulate speaker.
Right.
Trump is not especially articulate.
Just clear, clear speaker.
Yes, he's clear. He's clear and he's direct, and he pisses people off. You know, he's so direct. So I don't know. I just feel that this is one of the reasons why Trump's in office right now.
Absolutely.
This kind of thing.
Yeah, and with that Kamala Harris 60 Minutes interview, I think there was the one edit that you're talking about where they had positioned her answer, but then there was another one where the interviewer, who I thought did a great job by and large, you know, kind of holding her feet to the fire on some of the questions, or like, hey, that wasn't a real answer, will you answer me again? He also did give her a real nice benefit of the doubt, you know, to put it nicely, where he was like, this is what she meant to say. Like, they were, you know, showing you the video of their interview. It cuts to like the 60 minute screen, you know, and then he's given a voiceover. This is what she really meant to say. It's like, no, that's not the answer that you just, she just gave. You just showed.
And you know, the right has an argument that the media is in bed with the left. You know, that's one of the arguments that the right has had for years. And they also, an argument on the right is that, you know, our institutions of higher learning, our universities, aligned with the left, started 50, 60 years ago, and it's only gotten worse and whatnot. And I don't know, man. I just, I have to say that to me, it seems that way as well.
Well, and there's also something to be said, you know, going back to Andrew Carnegie and John Rockefeller really kind of laying out the foundation for our public education system. And, you know, it really was to make people workers, you know, by and large, right? And I think that's been great for America up to some point, but it's also, I think, to your point, over the last 5-6 decades, whether it's been co-opted or, you know, just slowly devolved over time. Or
some would say hijacked.
Co-opted, hijacked, but yeah, I think, you know, we're still building our education system around here's what to think instead of how to think, so you can be a good, effective worker. But I don't think it's just as black and white as saying, you know, like the left has, you know, taken control of the, you know, academic educational institutions. I mean, I think there is a very clear bias, like left leaning, if that's what you want to call it. But I don't think it was like some master plan that they had, you know. I think it's just really from a lack of care from a lot of people, you know, not getting involved in their school systems until it's like, what are they teaching my children, you know, and it's gotten too late. I know there was a big popular case in Kansas, you know, where they wanted to teach creationism in the public school system. And then there's, you know, well, if we're going to do that, then we need to teach about the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. And, you know, there's a big letter that, you know, some parent wrote to the school board of Kansas and, you know, ended up, you know, pushing back against that. So I think it really just comes back down to, you know, local government getting involved in, you know, the organizations that you can have an effect over, but it's just not interesting enough to most people, or they don't see the value in it.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting when you talked about when you were talking about the Kansas situation there, and I had something, but it's fleeting.
If it comes back up, you know, just stop me. But the other interesting kind of element that we're touching on, going back to, you know, how people are misconstrued in some of these congressional hearings, right? You got it?
Yeah, I got it. May I?
Yeah, please.
Just real quick. I think one of the legacies of Donald Trump, since we are kind of going politics here, he has started something in this country. You know, there's a movement that has started.
Yeah.
And for years and years and years, this is Jim Hampton's opinion here. For years and years and years, the right and the conservative people in this country, and it's part of, I think, the mindset and the makeup of being conservative is you you carry your cross. I mean, you shut up and you go to work and you do the job and you do what's expected and you deliver and you grit your teeth and bear it and go through and just, continue on, which is what our grandparents did and the generations before them. We're strong and we're going to just continue on. And finally now the right has awakened and they're not taking it anymore. They're stepping up. So I think you're going to see a whole new beginning in American politics. The Republican Party, as we've known it, is changing. Nationalism, which is, I'm kind of rambling, I'm all over the place, but nationalism is on the rise, and that scares a lot of people, and it should, because that's how wars start, right? But we have definitely tried. We've lost it, though. We've definitely tried globalization. Globalization is here, and we've seen it for the last 20-something years. I think it has fallen down on what maybe some of the promises were. A lot of jobs left over and went overseas. A ton of money has gone to help other countries develop and build, and that might be a good thing for humanity. But there's a lot of
at the expense of Americans,
a lot of pain and suffering in this country, and Americans are not working less; we're only working more.
Right.
And so I think we're seeing it's coming back around. And with Trump, there's a new era of nationalism here. But I think you're seeing the conservative movement,
nationalism or Nazism, Jim. No.
Yeah.
But that
I love the left accused Donald Trump of being, a neo-Nazi, and then you see him cutting deals and working with Israel the way he is. His daughter marries a Jewish guy and converts to Judaism. Right. If you're a neo-Nazi, you don't allow your daughter to marry a Jewish guy and convert to Judaism, at least, and not sing her praises, which he still does of his daughter.
Right.
So.
You also don't step down from, but again, there's a lot of people that don't agree, with him stepping down peacefully, that, blame him for what happened on January 6th.
Right.
And I think, let's save that for when I am able to actually, put together a document. We can kind of review some of that information, because I think that is very, hot button,
Absolutely.
sort of issue that I think also gets misconstrued a lot.
Yeah. And it's a strong argument that the anti-Trump people have that I have to say, I don't like what I saw there at all and what happened. So I'll be interested in having that discussion with you.
Yeah, I know that was like my grandfather's really sole reason, why he did not vote for Trump. And, he voted for him in 2016. And that's actually another point that I want to touch on. If you don't mind, I would love to go back and hear, how you voted, throughout time. And similarly, I have a much shorter history in that regard. I did not vote in 2016, my first election. I could have voted. I thought I did, but when I went back and looked at my voter registration, I did not. I was actually going to vote for Mark Cuban actually back in 2016. Thank goodness I did not. Right. And no, I do think he would have been better back in,
very capable guy.
I think he would have been better back in 2016, but him, like many others in the business world, I think had an element of jealousy of Donald Trump, not just from, becoming president, but even just getting buy-in from like his family. I know that was something that Mark Cuban publicly stated he struggled with going back to that election in 2016. And I think you might recall this shortly after that election, when a lot of people were up in arms, about Trump in office that first term, that I thought, again, I did not vote for him. Again, I thought, oh, he's too divisive, maybe not the best person for this country. Never held anything really against him. But what I did think he's done, the best thing that he's done for this country is remind people, especially not just remind people, but really for a lot of people, state for the first time that anyone that, meets the legal requirements to become president can become president.
Yep.
And that's a powerful statement to make. It sure
is. And, when he stepped up to the plate the first time, he was ridiculed. Yeah. And Nancy Pelosi said specifically, I will assure you Donald Trump will not become the president. And Barack Obama said the same thing. Here are
Tom Hanks.
And here are these elites, the Hollywood and the DC elites, I'll call them. And that's another reason why.
Silicon Valley as well.
Yeah. But the political elites, though, are the ones who are, because they're not, the Silicon Valley and the actors and the Hollywood folks, they're running businesses, and they're
But they're also the ones that are writing $100 million checks into these organizations.
Yeah.
And yet they are part of like those elite members of the Democratic Party, right?
Yeah.
Or the Republican Party. And again, I don't support either party, Right.
And I'm not a member of any. I will never be a member of a political party. I'm not going to put myself in a box like that. I'm going to
American.
I'm in the American Party that I make my own decision.
Right.
But yeah, I found it so interesting that the elites were so smug, with him, and they treated him very poorly. And it's one of the reasons why I think his attitude he is divisive. He is a divisive person. And I did not think that he would actually make it for this second time. I didn't think he would be able to make it. As my dad, my late father, he said, Donald Trump, if he runs, he's running against the world, not just against the Democrats.
Really was.
Because people in Europe don't want to see him because he's asking them to pay more money to NATO, et cetera, whatever. So he did it, and he won. Yeah. So he's an American icon, whether you like it or not. And that's my opinion. I think he'll go down in the history books as being he's a serious character in this country.
Yeah. No, I think I would even go out, and again, obviously opinion, I think he will go down as the best president in my lifetime up to this point, easily. And that's not saying much, I think, in my lifetime.
We need to see what the next 4 years. And here's what I'm telling all my friends who hate me because I voted for Donald Trump. Yeah. I'm telling them, and I'll tell everyone, and this podcast, anyone watching, in 4 years' time, I feel, and the reason I voted for Trump again is I feel he is going to do things that are going to make this country safer, stronger, better. We will be better off. Less wars, less unemployment, more jobs, lower interest rates, everything. And if I'm wrong in 4 years, I'm a modest guy, and I'll come right out and tell everyone that I screwed up by voting for Donald Trump a second time. Yeah. But I've made my decision, and I'm not the smartest guy by any means, and I'm not the most knowledgeable guy with all the quote unquote facts. Right. It's core values and core beliefs, and as divisive as he is, and he is. He's divisive. I find him to be divisive in many ways. As divisive he is, and unpresidential acting that he can act. Very unpresidential at times. From what we're used to, at least. He's still, and this is why I think a lot of the religious right still like him, even though he's slept with a porn star, right, and has had affairs, etc. He's not perfect by any means. No man is. We're all gullible or susceptible to human foibles or whatever.
The flaws,
the flaws. But they still align with him, as do I, because core values. It's a core American values that I feel he has. And I don't have a problem at all with this idea of taking care of our own people. Yeah. I wish they had worded it a little less arrogantly than America first, because it does. He's a very competitive guy for sure. Right. But I support the America first.
Yeah, but if not America first, where is America then? Right. Well,
it's time. Again, coming back, like what I was saying about the conservative movement and conservatives in this country, it's time. You're seeing more African-American people coming over to support Donald Trump. Right. You remember what Joe Biden said before the election when he was talking to Charlemagne the God, and he said, if you ain't black, if you don't vote for me, then you ain't black. Yeah. And he took a lot of flack for that because he assumed that the black vote and black community were going to vote Democrat. Why? Because they always have. I think we're seeing that start to change.
Well, and I had heard on another podcast this guy talking about his parents. Grew up in a small coal mining town, and back when they were in their 20s, now in their 60s, 70s, again, grandparents now. They're voting Democrat because those were the people that helped their coal mining town stay alive, back when they were in their 20s. And so literally every vote from then on out blew no matter who, Yep. And I think that is more often than not the case, in voting. And where I brought it up last time, I think that could be one of the most crucial fundamental changes our country can make is if we remove the parties, the party candidates from the ballot, and you can, create your own organization, as we have nonprofits and companies that you can like brand and campaign under. But what good is that going to do you, if you're not going to be listed on the ballot, right? I think everyone then has an equal footing, at least a more equal footing than what we have right now. I know, very idealistic,
there's a lot to what you're talking about, doing away with the party system.
Yeah.
Because we've touched on this, and that's way outside of my knowledge base. You need to get on this podcast. You need to bring in a political science professor to talk about that, because there's I'm sure there's a huge argument against that. It would be chaos.
I think a big argument against it, in the same way that we're seeing, again, in like these congressional hearings, Senate hearings, that, we can't do that because that's not the way that we always done it, right? And that's not the way that's kept us in power, and they may not say it, like that, use those words, but I think that's what it really, stems down to. And maybe even, again, we can have some local political officials around. Actually, last week while we were recording, I got that pre-canned response back from Rich McCormick and that letter I sent, and just kind of filling the audience, right now it is illegal. If you are just an individual person, if you have your own drone that may be capable of carrying like a sandwich that you make at home, and let's say you wanted to share that with your neighbor or a relative, your significant other. In my case, I might want to share lunch with my mom, or her share lunch with me. And right now it is illegal, against the law, for me to just share lunch with my mom, sending my drone to her, or her having my drone sent to her and then her loaded up with lunch to share it with me.
So it's not the drone, but it's carrying the cargo, right?
Well,
and that's for that. The reason that is in place is to prevent drugs from contraband.
So the illegal part there is having a drone fly beyond visual line of sight. And so if you want to be able to fly a drone beyond where you can see it with your own eyes, already you have to have a commercial operation. So you have to become commercially like a commercial drone operator. Probably want to establish an actual business entity, right? Then you have to submit a waiver to the FAA. They'll probably take 90 days to review it, and then almost definitely they're going to give you feedback. No, you're not going to be able to do this because it's unsafe. And, that's also what I want to cover is like, we're so much about safety in this country, almost above all else, that we would rather have safety above freedom. And to me, I would much rather live in a country where I have to worry about a drone falling on my head because we can share lunch, in like my example I'm given, then, hey, there's a potential, as infinitesimally small as it may be, that drone may, come down and, land on someone's head.
Or someone may be carrying something that could be detrimental to me and, drop on me.
Well, again, like from carrying contraband, it's already illegal to smuggle drugs. So we don't need any other laws. It's already, manslaughter is already illegal. I'm willing to take that risk, right? If my drone that I'm sending to my mom to share lunch falls out of the sky and kills someone, charge me with manslaughter. We already have all these laws in place. So why are we just continuing to take away our freedoms of law-abiding citizens, otherwise law-abiding citizens?
So you are a drone operator, correct?
I'm a commercial drone operator.
So you are a commercial drone operator. Have you submitted a request to the FAA?
For a beyond visual line of sight waiver? No, because that's...
You should do that, shouldn't you?
So, but that's...
that will give you insight.
We're not... It might be helpful just to say that we have it, but no,
I'd be curious to see how long it takes them to, number one, get back to you, number two, and hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I've submitted and I've gotten other waivers from the FAA, like before the current regulations where you just needed a strobe light to fly your drone at night. I got the waiver so I could fly all of our drones at night. I got waivers for specific airspaces as well. But really from the delivery standpoint, that makes sense, like us going and getting the waiver if we wanted to start a specific drone delivery business. But I want the business, we're selling the drones, and then the consumer, just because we've made the drones so easy and so valuable to use that you're just wanting to use it for like these delivery missions. And if we go get the waiver, you're not going to expect every household to then become a commercial drone operation. But that's essentially what the FAA is expecting right now for drone deliveries to take off. You think
that ruling will change too, right? Or you're hoping it changes?
It's going to, because one way or the other, we're either going to make the change happen, ahead of us getting this technology out there to the masses, or we're going to get the technology out to the masses. And unless the FAA just wants to put hundreds of thousands or millions of people in jail, which they can't already enforce the laws that they have right now, good luck. They're just going to have to adapt to it.
Your whole vision, as you see it, is, and it's not necessarily what you want, but it's just what you think is going to happen, right? You're saying, and we talked about this last time, touched on it a little bit, and it was like, in talking about Henry Ford and the automobiles and whatnot, it's like we're in the early stage
pre-Model T.
We're pre-Model T right now with the drones. And so while, like we said, when people see someone with a drone, you're either with the military or it's a toy.
Yeah.
In your view and viewpoint, drones are going to become more and more a part of our lives.
A household platform.
Like a car is
like
today.
A computer.
So people, and I know better than to snicker or laugh. I can't see it myself, but I also couldn't see, technology allowing someone to use their car as a taxi, or ordering clothes online or groceries online.
I've even heard the same thing with cell phones, right? People that worked early on in Verizon,
man, technology has we've been conditioned now, or we've been spanked by it to where we now know we should not laugh when people have a vision for the future, because technology is just advancing so fast, and who knows.
Well, and it's not even that as much as like, I think people like to think that in our modern day, like everything's figured out. We have all the answers. History's been written, there's no more history to be written, right? And like, I think people just kind of subconsciously think about it that way, especially when you think about it in like warfare, right? If we want to take a quick break, we can pick it up here. But I think that's a good moment for a commercial break.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no worries.
Commercial break.
Jake, talking to your mic more.
Check. How's it going? How's it looking, Brian?
Other than Jake constantly moving his face away from the mic and his audio levels dipping quite a bit, not bad.
You dipstick!
Alright, am I starting a new roll? Or are we still rolling?
I want to just get off that stool for a minute. I'm going to have a smoke if you don't mind.
Alright, I'm going to stop the roll.
Cool. So, I just want to pick up where we left off before taking that little break here. And I want to touch on the idea of like where a lot of people think that history has already been decided. And, there's a few different lenses to look at that through. I think, most apparently, in the way that we think about war, that, and the way that we think about boundaries or, borders, that, the lines as we see them on like Google Maps or we see them on the globe are going to be the way that they are, 5, 10, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. And that, there's never going to be wars via land grab or colonial expansion like we're seeing in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And, growing up in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, hearing about like the next generation of warfare isn't even going to be with guns. And again, to some degree that's true with the use of drones and modern warfare like in the Ukraine-Russian conflict, but it was more so built up to be like the way China's doing it now, not going to war with us via military, but going to war with us via economic influence, cultural influence, in the media, making our devices, right? And just, trying to kind of flex their muscles, so to speak, in a way that's not showing that they have more boots on the ground, which I think they do, right? And now they have a more advanced capability on the drone warfare perspective as well. But I think you had some thoughts about, how that's shaping up as well, with like how drones are being used now versus, even just like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I had said I have a brother who is retired U.S. Air Force colonel, and he was talking about drones. This is years ago, but drones are going to be used even very small to where, when it's up a couple hundred feet or whatever, you won't even be able to see it.
Right.
You won't know that you're being watched or whatever, but they'll be able to send drones in the forward combat area, and it could really, to find where enemy positions are, et cetera. And of course, we're using drones now to actually deliver payload, right? And, strike terrorist groups and whatnot. And the comment I guess I made to you was going back to your vision of where you see drones being a part of our society more in everyday life. It's certainly going to be a big part of the battlefield going forward. It already is, but I only wonder how we're going to see drones advance in fields in a combat situation in the future. It's going to be interesting.
And going back kind of to, I don't know, USAID, but, just kind of like the cutting government spending, that's something that I heard in one of the congressional hearings, like, all this money that's gone into programs like the F-35 or, the Osprey, I've heard a lot about, all these multi-$100 million aircraft programs, $1 billion, or in the case of the F-35, I think nearing $1 trillion, aircraft program. And it's like, for what purpose? A lot of these are delivered way over budget, way too long of a timeline. And now it's like there's something called drones. Like, how effective are fighter jets now in a world of drones, right? Yeah. And not just fighter jets. What about our huge, aircraft carriers? How do those hold up in modern warfare? Where, again, just from the perspective of the drones used in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, where, you were making the point about all the drones, in like the Middle East, wars being these large, piloted systems, that are essentially the size of, full manned aircraft just
right.
without a passenger in there. But now it's really just the consumer flying photo and video drones that are being used in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And then the custom, racing drones, FPV drones are what they're called. And they're like the kamikaze drones that are being
right.
used. And so now if you have all of those operating, with the same mission or within the same network where, you have like one master drone or, 5, 10 master drones, and there's another 5, 10, 50, 100, 1,000, drones performing the exact same action as that one like master drone that it's tied to. So now if we have, a aircraft carrier with all like the anti-aircraft weapons that you can imagine, fielded with helicopters and, fighter jets and whatever, can have operational capabilities of thousands of miles, what is that going to do against incoming, attack of 10,000, these small little FPV drones, all carrying a little charge of C4 or whatever.
Yeah.
Explosive, right?
I'm a former naval officer. I was served in the Navy for 5 years, and I don't know this for a fact, but I am willing to bet you a paycheck that in the U.S. Navy right now, there is a huge effort of going on of how to combat or defend against a drone attack. Yep. And imagine the number of drones that a carrier will be able to carry. They have their fleet of aircraft. I predict that we'll see a diminishing amount of actual manned aircraft and an increase on the drone craft that they're carrying. As those drones become more sophisticated going forward, that floating aircraft carrier, it's going to be able to carry thousands and thousands of drones.
Yeah.
The Nimitz, USS Nimitz has a crew of 6,000 personnel on board that carrier. When it pulls into a port city, it's like, the city has to be, of course, notified ahead of time. They have to prepare because it's like injecting 6,000, guests into your city. It's like a citywide event coming into your town. All the hotels fill up, all the restaurants go crazy, the bars go crazy.
Right.
So,
literally a floating city, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just tying back to the drones. It's going to be really interesting. I predict that we'll see, we talked about, again, your vision of drones in society. Well, drones use in the military for sure will be state of the art very soon, I predict. And you'll see the advancements in drone technology in the military before I think you'll see it. You may disagree with that.
No. I think, again, a lot of it happens in parallel. And then you just see like the technology that's being, used for the military used in much smaller scales than, what gets adopted, at the consumer scale of billions of people or even hundreds of millions of people. So you get, more expensive equipment and you're getting the very early, versions of it. But then, that same technology essentially gets worked down to the consumers. And in the way that we're talking about in like the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the most advanced drones and the ones that everyone wants to use, including within the United States, are those being made by the Chinese. And they're just like the typical off-the-shelf, now you can't really get them at Best Buy, but you used to just be able to go to any Best Buy, get replacement parts for them, extra batteries for them, buy a whole new drone, and, you were ready to go. And that's something that no company is even close to here in America, right? We had one of our advisors just 2-3 days ago send me a link to, there's a Chinese like Amazon type e-commerce knockoff called Temu, Temu. And you can get a $15 drone, and it comes with like 4 batteries, a 4K camera already on it, a controller that like works with your phone so you can see the video feed on your phone. And, again, $15, for that. And here we are selling our, smallest drone that we have available right now in the form of a kit that you as a customer build yourself for $500, right? And that's about really as affordable as it comes with like a US made drone system, right? And that, again, ours doesn't even come with a camera and you're building it. And that's just the vast difference of, producing these sort of products at scale that China has an immense, advantage over us to where, we talk about these ideas as kind of theories or concepts for using 1,000 drones, in a swarm to attack an adversary, and by and large for us, like, because that's a huge lift for any American company right now to make 1,000 drones. Where China, that could be done literally tomorrow by probably dozens of companies.
24-hour period, they could make thousands of drones.
Yeah, and they probably are, have them like in inventory, like these $15 drones, and that's to me where I do think, you're right. Like there's at some point limitations to the technology that you can fit in these like smaller, cheaper, affordable, more affordable systems. Even the ones that are like $2,000-$3,000, not $15. But I think what you're going to see even used at and have the most impact, not even just from a scale perspective in the military, are these consumer platforms. Because take a stab at it, and I may have already asked this before, but what's the most popular product bought by, I don't even think just the military, but, the whole government, the United States government?
The most popular item?
Product.
The most popular, or you mean the most commonly purchased?
Yeah, product and used.
Gosh.
And not just within the DOD, but we can even just say within the DOD.
Are you going to say like toilet seat or something like that? Or
Microsoft Office.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like Microsoft Office wasn't this big elaborate software created for the government, right? It was just made to be easy enough to use for the everyday household, the everyday business. And hey, it's easy enough for the everyday, paper pusher in the government. It's easy enough for the everyday soldier in the government, right? And I think that's the way that, it's going to happen with the drone industry. What's made easiest for the everyday head of household, farmer, roofer, photographer, videographer, chances are almost all of those same features or, that same mind that you have for making a drone easy to use for those people are going to apply to those people in the government as well, even the soldiers.
Can we switch gears and stay on? I want to stay on the drone, but I want to ask you something real specific. And we talked about this before, but it did intrigue me when I first heard you talking about it. You were talking about mounting a camera on the drone, which you already have, right? But then you were talking about using the Oculus so that a person could sit and actually experience flying through the air as you pilot the drone. Has there been any development on that?
Yeah, actually, maybe at our office right now. I'm not 100% sure, but one of the guys on our team working on that. So we're not using an Oculus VR headset, or I guess now it's called Meta, but that's a particular brand, right? But
it's the wraparound, gives you the 360 view.
And so we're not actually using a VR headset, although we could. We're just using a headset that we have available that, like, to you, it looks like a VR headset. But we're adding a little tracker that goes on top of it that gives you the ability to control that camera from the ground. So, like, you move your head to the left,
the camera turns.
The camera to the left.
I see.
So we are working on that, and you may or may not have had an influence over getting that as a project some of our interns are working on.
And I think of that from an enjoyment. Yeah, it'd be a thrill. But what about like a roofing inspector that can now, instead of getting up on the roof, he can now fly up and inspect? I would think it would have all kinds of commercial applications where you don't, at the top of the tower, you have to send a guy up every year to check the light up there, or to check a strobe light to make sure it's the wiring, whatever, the structure and integrity of it, because it's up so high and there, salt air, whatever, you say we're near the coast. So anyway, you fly the drone up there, and the guy can get within a few feet to inspect it. Can't actually touch it, but you don't have to send a person up there.
It's not quite I think it's definitely doable. I think to, again, do it at a scale that then makes it affordable for even like these tower inspection companies. There's both like companies like Crown Castle that own the towers, or own the land that the towers are on, or they'll sometimes lease out the land that the towers are on. They have, I think, some of their own drone pilots like internal to the company, but they then hire out a lot of contractors, a lot of independent drone service providers to then go do these tower inspections. And to do what you're talking about, you would either have to have like the inspector that knows what they're looking for on the site with the drone operator, train the drone operator to also know what to look for, or have the drone communicating over the internet, which is possible, just not common now, to where you could have the inspector back at his office with one of those headsets, and he's controlling the camera and getting that feed over the internet from anywhere around the world. And it's just not easy enough. Like, no one's built out that product, to your point, to make it that easy. But what I think makes even more sense than even if someone were to make it that easy, which could be us, is let's use the roof example, and then we can apply that to the tower example as well. But for like the roofing example, what I think makes the most sense is having a drone that you can map out a whole neighborhood at one time. Take all of those photos. Let's say for a neighborhood like this, you might have 1,500 photos to, map it out in 3D and get a fairly decent resolution, so you could see all the damage on the roofs and then get all the measurements of all the roofs here. And now one roofing company or an insurance company could, in one swoop, have someone sitting down at a computer just reviewing that whole neighborhood at a time. Or, even better yet, with all the hype around AI or machine learning type of software, where you could just train the software, hey, this is what damage looks like on roofs, and then it's automatically like circling or highlighting and generating a report with all of that damage and giving you all the measurements for the roofs.
And it's recorded, so you have a video recording.
Well, it would be more so like if you've gone into Google Maps and then like you've rotated the map to where you could actually like see the buildings in 3D. It would be more like that from a visual perspective. Then you could do like video fly-throughs of that like virtual 3D model. But at that point, like, why do you really need to have like the live view? Like, if you're looking at it, if you can see from that report, hey, there's the damage, it's circled there. You're not having to go in and like manually look for it, I think, in the way that you're talking about.
Well, it's exciting, and that this is just specifically to about with IV Media or iView and your products that you're working on, and that always was something that I thought would be a huge way to get people interested to buy their own drones so they could experience flying through the air, But I think about the commercial applications of it. I would think that they're. And do you foresee, like in my backyard, I have trees. I like to limb my trees up to bring the canopy of the trees up high. It makes for a prettier landscape sort of situation. And so it's been a few years since that's done. And so now my trees are kind of scraggly. They need to be limbed up. Do you ever foresee drones being able to, instead of sending a climber up with a chainsaw, do you think a drone would ever be big enough and strong enough to have a chainsaw component to go up and do that kind of work, roofing or tree trimming, tree husbandry?
Yes, in the same way, like at a larger scale, I've seen it done with helicopters. I think what would probably make more sense in that case, and I could be wrong, and it could be both, right? That you have a more specialized robot that I think I've seen where it's almost like a clamp that can go around.
Yeah, and it runs up.
Runs up it.
I've seen that too.
And so I think for a lot of cases, something like that might make a lot of sense. But in the same cases where they may use, a helicopter to, clear off the debris from, tree canopies running along power lines, I think why not use a drone there, and you could either go with a smaller drone or literally a helicopter-sized drone, and now you're just not, risking a human life.
Right. Very dangerous job. Yeah. Very dangerous. Electrocution hazard. And,
Yeah, I mean, just crash hazard.
Electrocute. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's something else I wanted to actually go back to. Going back to Henry Ford, we had talked about this a little before we had gotten started originally today, with how Henry Ford was kind of going through some trials of. Could you explain the situation a little bit better?
I don't remember a lot of the detail on it. I just know that he was at odds with a lot of people. And he had to go before a congressional committee. I'm pretty sure it was a congressional committee, and they asked him questions. And their whole angle was that this guy wasn't altogether. They said he was somewhat insane. He had this crazy idea of mass producing cars so everybody could have a car, right. And he had this crazy way of building a car, with the assembly line, right, production line, and. He was it's my understanding, he was so focused on his task at hand, he didn't really care as much about the rest of the world, the outside world. And they asked him specific questions. One was on the Revolutionary War, and he confused it with the War of 1812. And he was given answers that dealt with the War of 1812 because that was the most recent U.S. conflict, I guess, of that magnitude. And the question was specifically about the British, about the War of Independence. And so they tried to use that to say that this guy wasn't all here. And they tried to humiliate him. And he was, he was viewed as a crackpot kind of nutty guy. And it took a real big toll on him, on his life. But he persevered, and Ford Motor Company's in existence to this day, and we have Henry Ford to thank for a lot of what's made this country, what changed us and made us what we are.
Yeah, and I think to that end, he's underappreciated with his contributions to World War II, despite I had never heard about what you're talking about, him being accused in
anti-Semitic
hearings and being a crackpot. I've heard that he was definitely a controversial figure, even of his day, not just retroactively, looking back at him. But I have, seen a lot of people like historians, historians as well, that look back and I think misattribute a lot of people to having different character traits or whatever, or believing in something that's I don't actually think it is the case. And again, that's maybe me misattributing people in history as well. But I think there's been a lot of talk about like Henry Ford being a Nazi sympathizer.
Right.
And that was always kind of interesting to me looking back at him. Like, how could this like big, larger than life, sort of figure in American history, also be considered a Nazi sympathizer by like so many people? And
I was never, it wasn't my understanding that he was a Nazi sympathizer. It was my understanding that he was an anti-Semit, and he was anti-Semitic.
So,
and I think for a lot of people back in that time, there was a lot of ignorance about nationalities and various religious beliefs, and a Jewish person was looked at a certain way.
Well, back then, even like not that long ago, if you were Italian, you weren't white, right?
I mean, the Irish were looked upon as negative, when they came in mass, when they were coming over.
If you weren't like English or French, right? You weren't white.
You've seen the signs in New York City, Irish need not apply. They're putting signs out for jobs, and it says Irish need not apply. In other words, we ain't hiring any Irishmen, because they didn't like the Irish. And the blacks, you can imagine what, African American people, we had, segregation throughout the country back in those days. And, country was not in infancy, but it was different then than it is now. And we've learned, this country has learned, we're always going to be, trying to strive for a better culture or a better, a country. So, it's not perfect by any means. And so I say that about Henry Ford. Some people might say that, well, because he was an anti-Semitic, if indeed he was, you shouldn't buy Ford automobiles. And I don't hold that viewpoint. It was a different time back in those days. I'm not saying it was right to be anti-Semitic ever, or be racist or whatever.
So I do want to come back to Henry Ford and like him being considered anti-Semitic or Nazi sympathizer. And I think a lot of people would attribute both of those to him. But I think similarly, Elon Musk is getting mischaracterized nowadays. With "My heart goes out to you," that the Elon Musk salute, as some people are calling it now. And again, I think, you could even say, that is a Nazi salute in like the same motions. But I think from an intent perspective, at least it's very clear to me. And like, I think you, in my eyes, have to be very disingenuous to say Elon Musk is a Nazi and and then you hear like he's supporting like the far right movement over in Germany. Like, what does that actually mean? I think, people, it's very easy to just use those words and then, get a certain group of people to like just accept that as fact. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not going to buy Tesla cars anymore.
Right.
I was a huge advocate of, buying Tesla cars, and I was investing in the Tesla stock, but I can't
do it now because he's a Nazi.
Right.
Yeah,
and
I have seen nothing to make me say that Elon Musk is a Nazi sympathizer, a neo-Nazi or anything like that. I mean, he's from South Africa, right? He's a white guy and he's from South Africa.
He's my favorite African.
There are people who know a lot more about him than me who we need to have on to talk about him, because there's people that despise him, and
he's a complicated individual like us all, right?
Yeah, I mean, he is a guy who, you can say whatever you want to say about Elon Musk, but he's no idiot. He is. You go out in your backyard, if you don't have a lot of light pollution, go out in your backyard, and if you can see the heavens on a clear night, stand there for a few minutes, and you will see eventually, you'll see a satellite chugging across the sky, just a tiny little, orange dot, and it'll be boogieing across the sky. Yeah. It might be one of his satellites.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is, he's
accomplished.
He's an accomplished guy. He's very capable. And this is kind of tying in with what we were saying earlier about, how like the conservative movement and the Trump movement, you're seeing a different level of people getting involved now. Yep. These are people who, this is my opinion, but we're seeing people who are very adroit or accomplished and who have a lot of ability. And it's changing. It's gonna be interesting to see the political climate of this country in 10 years. I think the stuff that Trump is doing now will have far-reaching impacts, as time goes on.
I hope so, and that's something that I need to look more into in relation to DOGE. I guess I've heard, and I don't know how much of this is, propaganda, if you will, that there's been a falling out of sorts between Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, where I guess Vivek is no longer involved in DOGE because from what I've heard, I guess Vivek wants to go about some of this change in a way that he thinks would be more permanent and less so in a way that like an executive order works, to where, if the next president doesn't agree and you don't have the buy-in from the people, then, it's, what good is it for 4 years, 3 years? He's
running for governorship of Ohio. Yeah,
and
his
I
home
think
state.
That might be more of the reason why he's backed out. If I had to guess, and there might just be, again, a certain group of the media trying to propagate a story about, hey, look, they're fighting each other, on the inside. I don't know. And that's just, what little I've heard, and wanted to see if you had any thoughts about that.
I just knew that they had split, and that Vivek Ramaswamy is moving more toward the governorship. I see him as more of a, I don't want to say politician, because he's definitely radical. When you look at him, compare him to all the other politicians. He's a very accomplished guy, and you can just tell the people that are coming into this cabinet and into this political system, they're very accomplished people who I think have tremendous ability.
My apprehension with Vivek, as articulate as he is, as much as he, I think hits the right talking points, when I hear about him being a successful guy, by what measures, right? If we are really just talking about the money he's made, I guess he's a multi-hundred millionaire. Congratulations, right? But I don't think in society, we talk enough like, how did you make your money? And like, I don't want to put anyone down for like putting food on their table, working a job, right? But I think we've almost like, hey, how much money do you make? And you're so great just because you have all this money, versus like, wait, let's actually look more into like, what did your companies do? Or did you just, and again,
he was healthcare.
Creating value for investors, right? That's still creating value, right? But, and again, very ignorant perspective from what I have seen. Like when I looked into Vivek when he was running for president, it seemed like a lot of his companies weren't necessarily shell companies, but they weren't successful beyond the fact that he was just able to raise a lot of money and then, work with the right investors to maybe sell off the company for a profit as part of like a private deal or a SPAC. And basically, he was good at talking and making money, which is definitely two valuable skill sets. But I don't know, in the same way we talk about Elon Musk being an accomplished guy, like his companies he's building the money, building
state-of-the-art automobiles,
tangible effects from
building state-of-the-art automobiles that are utilizing cutting-edge technology.
Even like none of us here drive one of them, but we actively see the effect. And I'm not trying to say everyone has to have this like global public effect, but I don't think we should be revering people just for like their accomplishments from a money perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But I wanted to tie that back really quick to Henry Ford, where, I heard about him as a Nazi sympathizer. And, I always thought that was kind of interesting, diving more into it, that I think, again, it's just kind of in some cases, misunderstanding, and a lot of other cases, a purpose like mischaracterization of him. Because, again, it's almost like in modern day society, we don't want to appreciate, successful people that stand out above the rest, so to speak, because then they may make other people feel lesser than, right? And I think it's, like with the whole statues, problem that Trump faced in his first administration. Everyone wanted to like burn down statues or tear down statues of these prominent figures just because they had some character flaws. Some may be more abhorrent than others. But it's like, should we really be taking down history and like trying to misconstrue it just because we don't agree with it or what they did as, individual people? And I think in Henry Ford's case, he was very much actually like Walt Disney, anti-war. He was like many people at the time, like, what did Hitler do to America? What did Nazi Germany do to America? And there was maybe not an overwhelming majority, but I would say an overwhelming minority, if nothing else, of Americans that wanted nothing to do with World War II, right? And there's we touched
before
on this
Pearl Harbor. I think there were a lot of people. There were a lot of people in this country.
I think that was probably most of
isolationists,
America, right? And that's why we hadn't gotten into it. I think again, Washington, a lot of generals and federal officials in Washington wanted us to get in World War II sooner than what we did, but we had no just cause, right? We were not attacked, and then always, I just remember on a totally separate accord, hearing growing up that we may have had some understanding of the Pearl Harbor attack happening, and we were okay with it, or we kind of minimized the damages ahead of time to use it as an excuse to get into World War II. I don't know how true that is, but it does, if there is any truth to that, and this totally unrelated, anecdote, if you will, about Henry Ford seemed to match up pretty well, where you did have most of America really not wanting to get involved in these international conflicts. And, hey, let's kind of mischaracterize, what this is, well, let's mischaracterize these people and what they're thinking. We're like, hey, this is now an existential threat. We just got attacked, on American soil.
I think this is in broad terms, but I think the Republican mentality before Pearl Harbor was isolationist mentality. Right. And after Pearl happened, FDR was very much in favor of. And he asked Congress to declare war on Japan, and that automatically put us in conflict with Nazi Germany. Right. And we were just starting to come out of the Great Depression, right? And the war effort is one of the big things that pushed the United States due to our manufacturing. Of course, all the men put on uniforms and went overseas, and all the women went to the factories, right?
Working textiles.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge, tremendous commitment. Right. I could do a quick little aside that I'm kind of scared to do it because I don't want to take us too far off. When I hear Pete Buttigieg say that he said in the primaries when he was trying to run for president, right, to be the Democratic candidate, he made the comment that climate change is so important and so severe, we're going to need. I can't say exactly what he said, but he said we're going to have a commitment at the same level or even more than the generation had in the Second World War to defeat fascism. And I just sit and think about that. You mean to tell me that people were uprooted from their homes, they went overseas and engaged and put their lives on the line? People here left their careers and being a homeowner or a homemaker or whatever, right, and went to the factories and worked. You mean to tell me that you think Americans today are going to commit to fight climate change with the same passion that great generation had to end tyranny or to end fascism on the continent of Europe?
Literally take down evil personified in Hitler.
He absolutely, Pete Buttigieg owes the greatest generation, as Tom Brokaw wrote his book and coined them, that generation of Americans. He called them the greatest generation. Pete Buttigieg owes those people who are still alive, he owes them an apology to put them at the same level, to say that the people in this country would have to commit to fighting climate change at the same intensity or even more. Yeah. All that was just political grandstanding and talk and just rhetoric. Just rhetoric is all that was. I had to say that because that popped into my head as we were talking about this. But
yeah, no, I could not agree with you more there. I mean, I think again, I think we're getting out of this kind of culture of virtue signaling, especially with the DEI, act. There was literally an executive order through Joe Biden's administration making it so every federal organization, every federal agency, every federal body had to have a DEI office and appoint DEI hires, right? They would have to hire a black person for this role, a woman for this role, and have to, meet these quotas, right? And I think, in the same way, there's all of these like mischaracterizations of, well, that's not what really DEI was meant to be. It's like there's part of these like systematic, elements of the system that like just make it so you don't want to hire, a black guy or one. And it's like, that kind of goes back to, women, being paid 77 cents
on every dollar. Yeah.
It's like, if that were true, no men would be hired, right? I mean, it's just economics at that point, right? If everyone were doing the same job, and you could hire for someone 77 cents on the dollar, like, right? I mean, that's just straight dollars and cents. And it really comes down to, the cliche that, women want to go into more humanitarian fields where they can have a more tangible, impact on, caring for another human being, providing value to that other human being, where, guys, they like cool technology. They like, they want to build something cool, right? Make something more often than not. And again, those are generalizations, but I
would say so, big time. And DEI, I can't really talk about DEI. I don't know a lot about the DEI. I'm learning more about it. I know that it's the Trump administration. I know is definitely opposed to it, and we're seeing an attack on it.
Yeah.
And real quickly, when you talk about Henry Ford and being a Nazi symbol, I don't know that he was a Nazi. You know that. I don't know that he was a Nazi symbol.
I don't think he was. I think he gets characterized as.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am very confident that he was characterized as an anti-Semitic. Yeah. As was Charles Lindbergh.
Yeah.
I mean, there were prominent figures who were anti-Jewish.
Same with Walt Disney. Yeah.
Walt Disney was anti-Semitic. Yeah.
Well, characterize it again.
Characterize.
And they were both. I'm sorry, but like both Walt Disney and Henry Ford, very publicly vocal anti-war going into World War II.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those were probably the most two influential people in the success of World War II. Between Disney, making pretty much all the propaganda films to, get people excited to join, our side, right? To draft or enlist. And then they, don't get me wrong, there's more than that. Like Disney, they were doing a lot of advanced research. And Disney still does a lot as a company, a lot of advanced technology research. I don't think a lot of people understand, and they don't get enough credit for it. But similarly, of course, I think it's a lot more known for the impact that Henry Ford had. Of course, making a lot of automobiles, getting into aircraft. There's Ford Aviation, or it might have been Ford Aircraft Company. But I mean, those two guys, like, they didn't want America to get into war, but if we're in war, they're Americans, and that's, where I kind of consider myself, like, I don't want to get into, making drones for warfare, but should we find, America under attack, we're weaponizing our drones and we're going to arm the civilian populace. And that's where, I think from a Second Amendment standpoint, there's already an infringement on our Second Amendment rights by the FAA for you just owning a drone and you have no intention of ever flying it in FAA, which should be public airspace, but they say it's federal airspace that, we kind of get to use. That you just owning a drone, having no intention to use their airspace, you still legally have to register your drone with the federal government, right? You are on a registry. And that to me is a blatant...
That bothers you because you're a pilot and a flyer. And see, I'm not a guy that flies. I mean, only flying I do is out of the Atlanta airport when I'm going somewhere, right?
Well, but no,
I mean, I'm not a pilot. I don't own a drone, and I don't have any desire to get up there and utilize, because I don't see a need for it. I've never had drones in my life, but give me some time, and we see with more and more drones activity in our culture and whatnot. It may be that I decide to get myself a drone in the future sometime.
Yeah, again, in the same way, kind of
so
like
I can fly a sandwich,
moment, right?
I can fly a sandwich over to you.
Yeah, going to like the local Valero or whatever, like the local restaurant. Like, why would you want to go drive and pick up your order if you could just set your drone outside?
Or you can use Uber Eats. You can use Uber Eats. Of course, Uber Eats maybe bring it to you by drone. And this is something that we had talked about, I think, last time. I am convinced there would be a lot of people who would order a pizza. If Papa John's in this area came
Papa
out,
John's in Sandy Springs does just that. Yep.
They deliver via drone?
Yep.
I would think that there would be people who would want that. They would order the pizza just to experience it, have the drone fly it down. What do? Bring it to your front door area and
I don't know what this Papa John's does in the Sandy Springs area, and I don't know if they're still actively doing it, but they did at least have a test run 6 months, a year, whatever the case may be. They were delivering pizzas to residents within, I think, 2 miles of that store in Sandy Springs.
It really interesting.
But yeah, like Walgreens, like down in the villages in Florida, they're delivering prescription medication via drone in suburbs in like Raleigh, North Carolina, and a place in, I think, Virginia. And there's Dallas is a huge spot where they're doing, Walmart is doing drone deliveries to residents around like a dozen or so stores in like the Dallas area. And so, I mean, it is happening, but again, in the same way that I was talking about, it's only a matter of time before the technology becomes so easy to use and affordable enough that why are you paying for a service every time you want to get the value out of a drone, like for a delivery, when you could just, buy it outright like you do a car or a computer, and you're not having to rent time for it.
Right. Interesting. We'll see. It's like we say, we got 4 years with this president and this new movement. Let's see what happens. All we can do is wait and see. Let's see the result,
or build it,
and let's see what happens with the drone community. So
I guess just kind of wrapping it up here. I think we talked about this. We'll see what next episode or the next few episodes look like. We definitely want to start bringing in some people, both from within our life as well as others. I know I mentioned my letter to Rich McCormick that I wrote. Don't think he would come on, seeing as I got a pretty simple canned response from him, I'll say, but funnily enough, I was talking, I got a phone call from the mayor of Brazelton, and he was asking if I could help get an internship for one of his family friends actually working with us. He's going to Auburn, studying mechanical engineering, and he was wanting to see if he could come intern with us. And so I mentioned to him that, hey, I wrote a letter to, I was actually thinking he was the mayor. I forgot that I thought he was the mayor of Roswell, not Brazelton. So I was like, I don't know if he's our congressman. I don't know if you're part of the 7th district, but told him that I had reached out, and he was like, well, yeah, with him being a doctor, maybe, and he's on the different medical committees, in Congress and a couple others. But he mentioned, let me pull up his name. I think it's Andrew. Yeah, Andrew Clyde. Kurt Ward, the Brazelton mayor, he mentioned that Andrew Clyde, who lives out in the 9th Congressional District, might be a better guy to, kind of bark up his tree, so to speak. And I'm going to reach out to him, and maybe we can have that conversation, or I can have at least part of that conversation I would like to have maybe in this sort of format. And apparently very kind of salt of the earth guy, pretty much just one issue sort of Second Amendment type of guy as well. And so, again, not really looking at the Second Amendment from how it's traditionally thought of, your right to own gun, right? Your right to own and use a gun here. But if you actually look at the Second Amendment as your right to own and bear weapons, right? Specifically how the Supreme Court has ruled it, it's weapons that you would use in a well-organized militia.
Right.
And what we were talking about earlier, the weapons that you use in a well-organized militia in 2025 and going forward are more so drones and guns. And not even just drones that are specifically weaponized, but like we were talking about, the Chinese drones that are being used in the Ukraine-Russia war, those are just the flying camera drones that any, professional photographer or videographer, wants to use. And so it's just by having, as it stands right now, where you have to register your drone, that's a breach of the Second Amendment right as I think, very clearly interpret it, you know.
Well, let's get this fellow on and see what his viewpoint is, and see if he agrees with you on that.
Yeah, and maybe we can bring about some reform to the FAA beyond just Trump giving the boot to the former head.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Jim, great conversation again.
Yep, thanks.
You have any gigs or anything like that coming up that you want to talk about?
On March the 29th, I play in a Joe Cocker tribute band called Mad Dogs and Southerners. It is a tribute to the tour that happened in 1974 with Joe Cocker, Leon Russell, and Rita Coolidge. The band was called Mad Dogs and Englishmen. It was a band that was put together real quickly. They used a Los Angeles top session musician players to play in this band, and it traveled all over the country. And more and more people started to follow the band, and it became this entourage of people up on, like 30 people up on stage, and all hippies singing, and all. It was a lot of fun. But it was really kind of historic, and so I'm in this band called Mad Dogs and Southerners, and so we're playing at Mad Life Stage and Studio in Woodstock on March the 29th. The show's at 9:30 p.m. So if anybody out there likes Joe Cocker, I'd love for you to come and check the band out.
Cool. And I guess kind of similarly, not in a band. I don't play an instrument at least nearly as well as Jim plays the bass, but slaps the bass. In any case, we have an event coming up with Virginia Military Institute and NCI. I think it's the Virginia Military Institute, and then NCI, the New College Institute, I believe, on February 15th, day after Valentine's Day. So if you're
going up there?
Yeah, in or around Martinsville, Virginia.
So VMI, I mean, that's what are you doing with VMI?
So last year we did a what we called a Drones for Developers workshop with them, and so it was more like a public outreach event. We partnered with one of their professors up there who teaches in their computer science department, also oversees their drone club, and so we wanted to see how we could work together beyond, like, he's working on a research paper right now that we're giving him some content and helping him out with, and he's including us on that, and we're collaborating on some software efforts together. But we're just basically doing, like, I look at it as a marketing event, and that's
huge. VMI is a very it's a premier military school, historic military school. Yeah. Who is it? The famous General
Patton.
Well, Patton went to West Point, I'm pretty sure. Who is it?
Stonewall Jackson.
He may have gone, but there was a famous World War II general, very famous guy who went to VMI, and I'm just drawing a blank as to who it was. It'll come to me in a second. That's him, General Marshall, okay. George Marshall. Yeah. Yeah. If you saw the movie Saving Private Ryan, do you see that movie?
I have not. No.
You ought to watch it. Yeah. It's Tom Hanks. It's a great movie. There's a really great scene. They're back in the States, and they're getting the letters of the soldiers who've been killed over in Europe. This is during the Second World War, right? Yeah. And somebody happens to see a name Ryan, and then sees the home address, and then later that day they see another one from the same address, a different first name but the last name Ryan, and then before long they find another one, and so it turns out there's 3 or 4 boys. There's 4 boys with the last name Orion. They're all on Europe, on the continent, fighting. This is that greatest generation we're talking about, right? And 3 of them have been killed. And so what they do is they say there's one left. And so the goal is to get him out of Europe and get him home so that his family name can survive. And they go into the head general's office with this request, and it's him. It's General
Marshall.
It's General Marshall, and he reads a famous letter that Abraham Lincoln wrote to a Union mother who lost 5 sons. It's true. Yeah. She lost. I'm pretty sure it was 5 boys fighting for the Union, and they all died in the Civil War. And he wrote this letter, Abraham Lincoln, and Marshall reads it. And it's really something. You should watch the movie just for that part. It's a great action movie, and it's soldiers and they're fighting and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of action, but it's really touching when you listen to Abraham Lincoln's words written so eloquently at that terrible time.
Yeah, just I guess one quick comment about that, where again we like to look at the Civil War as like the good guys versus bad guys, like those Southerners, they're just evil, racist people, and even like you look at the highest level, Robert E. Lee, who represented the Confederate Army, as their general, in command, and it was really just because he felt more loyalty or allegiance to the state of Virginia than the Union at that time.
Yeah.
And that was very, very common. Like, because at that time, like, there wasn't, the sort of mass communication, instant communication that we had that makes our borders seem more seamless. And, obviously there are still some pretty stark differences between the laws and the cultures, even amongst our own 50 states. But at that time, you were much more from that state, from that colony than you were from the Union.
Federalism was nothing like it is today, right?
Well, that was the topic of the day. It wasn't Republican, Democrat. It was Federalist, anti-Federalist.
Of course, that argument or that debate had happened before with Adams and Jefferson. And Adams wrote, I think, the Federalist Papers, which was a series of essays that he wrote on why we needed a strong federal government. And Jefferson would, if he were here today,
vitriol between them two.
Big time. Yeah. Jefferson would have been fine if each state was like its own country, and it is a beautiful idea and human freedom for sure. I think Adams's argument won out over the long haul because when you see like
there's elements of both for sure.
Yeah, in today's world, we do need I feel we need a strong federal government. And anyway, great podcast today, and I enjoyed it. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely. All right.